What is going on, guys? Welcome to your 7th tutorial on how to create a stock market analyzer program in the Java programming language. And in this tutorial, I'm pretty much going to be taking the rest of the values from this array right here and turning them into floats. Now, we already handled our date objects right here. So now we pretty much got to loop through the entire array again and change all the rest of the elements into pretty much just floats. So remember, we can't work with them right now because they're a string, and we can't do math to like strings. We can only do it if it's like a math, float, int, double, something like that. So let's just make a comment: create a float array for rest of elements right there. So now we already created this array called data array, and all we're going to be doing in this method is populating it. So let's go ahead and make a method called public void create data array. Make sure to spell that right. It's pretty important. And instead of oblique, make sure you put public right there. So now let's go ahead and loop through the array again. So for int x equals 0, x is less than n dot length, and I forgot to do something. For the parameter, we need to pass in string of n. So this pretty much means that we have an array called n. So int x equals 0, x is less than n dot length, and next just do x plus plus. And for our inner loop, we're going to loop through the columns for, and just name it y equals 0 because we always do. Y is less than n of x dot length, and just go ahead and put y plus plus the increment through y every time. So this is pretty much going through every single element in our array. Done, 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 done. Next row. It's pretty much going to iterate through every single one of those. So we already handled the 0th element in there right here. So what we have to do is we're going to test for every element in here. So we could have a bunch of if, else if statements, but instead we're going to make it easy, and we're going to just pass a switch. It's going to test for y, which is pretty much the elements, as I said. And what's going to happen is this: if it gets the case of 0, which is the first element we already handled, what do we want to do? Well, we already handled this, but we need to populate the array called data array, and we're going to set it equal to x of y, which is pretty much its position. We're just going to set it equal to 0 because we're not going to be using it ever. You can set it equal to null if you want, probably, but we're using float, so let's just set it equal to 0. And after everything, after you set an element, you want to break it out each time, since there's no need to keep doing it. So here's where you get to the good stuff. In the case of 1, if it gets to the first element, which would be this one, what do we want to do? Well, in the case of 1, let's just go ahead and make our data array right there into position that it's at already. We're going to set this equal to new float, and as your parameters, let me end that, just put n x y. And what this pretty much does is it puts it in the exact same position it was, but it puts it in a different array as a float instead of a string. And remember, we're doing this, we're pretty much duplicating the array, but we're putting it in an array called data array instead of items, and we're changing it from a string to a float. So now when we do that, we just want to break out of it right here. So that's the case of 1, but what about for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Well, look how easy this is right here. Since we wrote our code with x's and y's instead of 1s and 2s and stuff like that, we can do something like this: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we gotta change all this: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we don't need a default because we wrote our code perfectly, or at least you should. So again, what this pretty much does is it loops through this entire thing. When it gets to 0, it pretty much just sets it to 0, changes all these to floats, new line 0, changes it to 0, put these all in the new array where they were before, but it's floats now. So now we have an array that we can actually work with, and what we usually want to do is just print it out. So let's make a comment right here called print data array, and let's go ahead and make that comment for real. There we go. And now let's make a method real quick to print out the data array, and someone's texting me, but oh well. Public void print array. It doesn't take any parameters, and void right there. And now I'm gonna loop through the array again one last time, I promise. Int x equals 0, x is less than data array dot the length. You could probably make it so you could pass an array in here as an argument, but I mean, what's the fun of that? And now let's loop through the columns for int y equals 0, and go ahead and put y is less than, where are you at, y? Less than data array of x dot length, and go ahead and put y plus plus to loop through that. And now what do we want to do is pretty much just print out the item. So system, I always do that, out printf is probably our best option. And let's go ahead and for the format just put %s, and of course that string is data array x of y right there. So put system out print line. And did I make sure to print out the data array? Yes, I did. So now we have a method to pretty much print out the array to make sure we didn't fudge anything up. So let's go ahead and in our main stock market with our main method, let's go ahead and make our new formulas object. Because remember, we made a new class called formulas right here, and name it f equal new formulas. And I spelled that wrong. Formulas. And it doesn't take anything because we didn't build a constructor for it. And what we need to do first is we need to create that data array right here. Create data array. So f dot create data array, those are parameters it takes, and it takes a parameter, this is called n, of an array. And remember, we made this method called getArray just for this purpose, so we didn't have to pass it in items. How awesome is that? And r.getArray, and that's all we have to do. So instead of passing in items, we called a method from this readFiles class to read that array. So how awesome is that? I mean, this is some pretty clever programming here. Thank you very much. And after this, of course, we just made that method called printArray right here. So let's go ahead and use that baby. f.printArray. And now let's see what we got. Hopefully no errors. Oh my god, look how beautiful this is. A nice, perfectly formatted printed array with the data array that we just created. And now you can see instead of strings, it went through the old array of strings, set the first element to 0.0, and set all of these elements, these are actually floats instead of string now. So now when we try to add them up and do calculations to them, they actually work. How awesome is that? So in the next tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you how to do some cool formulas with all this data. Now that it's actually data and not just a bunch of characters. So that was I kind of went fast, but you guys were complaining that I need to get in some pretty advanced stuff. So this should give you a good head start on how to create a real a real working Java program. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be finally getting into the good stuff and how to do some formulas and analyze the stocks themselves. So if you don't understand, trust me, you will next time. It's going to be amazing. So thank you guys for watching and sticking with me so far. I'm so happy to be teaching you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.